All right, thanks for joining us. Today we have Alexander Gould, who spoke to our team at TSTC back in the summer about what medium and his size newspapers look for in press releases and how we can help them offer some. And he offered us some suggestions of what we could send them to help enhance our coverage in newspapers. So Alexander, I'll let you go ahead and get started. And he's very open to questions. We kind of asking questions when he got going.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. As Ben said, I like questions. I did not create a 75-page PowerPoint deck to bore anyone today with. So I really like to just have a discussion. I'll start talking, jump in, interrupt me at any time, and hopefully this is a little bit interactive. But as I met with TSTC's group a couple months ago, really talking about what newsrooms need and want to interact with their organization to hopefully promote them as well as possible. And I think the first thing is I would remind all of you, you're in a relationship business, right? You are dealing with people. So you want to get your message out, if that's a community college or whatever type of institution you are, we're an avenue to get that information out to the public. So I would remind you, as being a relationship business, I kind of asked you the question, when was the last time you just reached out to your local journalist or newsroom or media outlet and just said, hey, I'd like to talk to you, right? So not, hey, I have something I want to give you. Hey, I want something to cover, or, ask for some time and get to know that local journalist, build a relationship with that person. I'm sure some of you have really, really great relationships, but newsrooms of our size, and I should have started with, the newsrooms we have, can range from one person large to 10. But again, there's not resources all over the place. So again, the better that relationship becomes, the easier it is to kind of get something you need to get published. And usually you can have a more open dialogue about those things. I'd also, as you're sitting and having that conversation, take time to understand what the demands of that person's job is, right? So if you're dealing with a one-person newsroom, understand when's a good time to call them, when's a bad time to call them, right? So if you want something out of one of my smallest newsrooms, calling them on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock for coverage on something on Wednesday, you're probably not going to get a good answer. Because they are trying to get a publication out to publish the very next day, or are swamped and won't even take the call because they're trying to get something out. So understanding that working business cycle is important for you guys to move forward. And that, again, that could be a print cycle, that could be a radio cycle, that could be any medium, right? That's not just germane to a news audience. The other part of you guys all have press releases you have to get out, right? Hey, my boss wants me to get this piece of information out at this time to promote whatever event, person visiting, increased enrollment, whatever that might be. But I would say I'd absolutely encourage you, again, to pick up the phone, call your local journalist and say, hey, we're working on these two or three ideas here at the college. Which one of these excites you, or you think would be most exciting for your audience to consume, right? So I suggest that for a couple of reasons. You may not know what special section or what special package your journalist is working on, that one of those things may marry really well to, and he can say, oh, give me that. I know where we can publish that. Or something that you're working really hard and spending a lot of time on never gets picked up or published in any way, shape, or form. Well, now that's a waste of your time, right? So if you're working in that relationship of give and take and kind of brainstorming together, better chance it gets published and out to the public, which is obviously your goal. And the second part is you're not wasting time on something that's never going to publish. And again, I'm sure that all of you don't have unlimited resources either, right? Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day, and I'm going to guess all of you don't want to just be doing press releases for those 24 hours. And if you are, you want to get them that are going to be viewed. So again, I'd ask you to say, hey, reach out to that person, say, hey, I want to brainstorm. What do you need from me? How can I, what can I produce that's going to be exciting to your audience? So some of the things where if you're dealing with a tried and true, what I'll call traditional newspaper legacy business, you're used to writing and sending a written Word document, right? It is a written Word press release. I'd encourage you to expand that horizon, which is going to include, you want to always have photos, right? If you can send some photos with that press release, you're just expanding how much space you're probably going to get in that publication. And you're also making that journalist's life easier, because now I don't have to go find some piece of artwork, or it may not be the artwork I go find as a journalist may not be the artwork you as an institution really want to have published next to your story, right? It may be we just had this with a church story we ran. They didn't give us good art. They decided to copy and paste photos into a Word document, which is not something that we can pick up and actually publish because of how poor that resolution is. So we picked up an older story, and or not an older story, an older image. And well, unfortunately, that person is no longer part of the church, and they're also not alive anymore. So that that wasn't good for either party, right? They weren't happy because they were happy with the story, but the photo was with somebody that did not have any affiliation with the church later in their life. So it really wasn't a person they wanted to show off next to the story or content. And obviously, as a person who's passed away, that really isn't good for either party, right? In that context. So again, if you can you can have more control over that artwork or that visual. Take that ability to do that, right? Include that with the press release. The second thing is audio. If you're producing any audio, if there's an audio track that may go well, if that's a 10-second soundbite that could go with it, again, we embed that in our online version of the stories. That can be embedded in an e-edition of the story. So those are places, again, if you're dealing with TV, they can pick that and put in their website. Obviously, radio always wants sound bites, right? So think of it as a multimedia piece, right? Not just, I'm going to send one piece, send as many pieces as possible. Again, the more things you provide, the more things you make it easier for the journalist to pick up and run with. And last but not least, if you're not sending video, you're really dropping the ball. As we try to build out our audience, they are consuming more and more video. It does not need to be highly produced content. It needs to be interesting content, right? YouTube did not make their business building it on highly polished visuals. Is it interesting? Excuse me. So again, these do not need to be long. I would actually recommend the shorter, the better, right? 15 seconds, 30 seconds. If they get longer than that, they probably are too long and the person's not going to watch it all the way through anyhow. So again, that's a good piece to run next to or in lieu of the written content. So we may pick up that video and share it socially, and again, tag you in that post. Again, that gets you a greater audience, a greater web to the content you're producing. Again, going back to the part of talking to your journalists, say, hey, is there a preference of these multimedia pieces that work better for your institution or better for their business? And they may say, hey, we really love, we're putting together a podcast. We love as many audio bites as you can send us. And we could do that part. The other part is, as you're talking to that person, say, hey, I'm going to send you the press release, but hey, if you'd love to sit down and do an audio interview or a video interview, we'd love to make that part happen. B-roll is not super important. And I think that would be a conversation that you would have with the journalists if they're working on a larger package. They might be working on a profile section. In that case, they may want some B-roll that they could work with, right? Hey, give me the person who's climbing the pole or the professor that you want to show off. But I think in the day-to-day kind of press release, run-of-the-mill stuff, it's, hey, I really just want 15 seconds with your coach talking about the big game. Or, hey, I want to talk to, we really want if you're talking about enrollment being up, let's get 15 seconds of what does that mean to the campus or to the community. And that's kind of a great segue to the next piece that I wanted to touch on, which is understanding that audience that you're talking to, right? So what your boss is asking you to promote, the president of the institution wants you to promote, may not actually be what the audience really wants to receive. And what I mean by that is your president's going to be super excited about enrollment being up, going to give you this great quote of how great that is to the college and how important it is. But the person reading the story, how does that actually affect them, right? So think about the audience that's receiving that message, and most cases, obviously it's a person, but they're going to care about family. Do they have family that's affected by this press release in any way? Do they have friends that are affected? And lastly, do they have neighbors? If they don't have any of those three things, their next immediate thought is, how does this impact my wallet? Right? So, that increase in enrollment may be, hey, we've increased enrollment, and that's increased because in the local community, it's up by 20%, and we've got more kids coming straight from the high school right to our institution. And that's, good for the community because it's improving economic development. Or, hey, because we continue to bring more and more kids onto campus, we're continuing to keep tuition low, which is good for your cost of living kind of thing. So again, think about how you turn that, hey, I understand you're answering it for the person who is asking you to put together that media message, but also, is the audience going to actually find it interesting and want to consume it, right? So if you're going to produce it, do they want to like it? Do they want to engage with it? Can they ask more questions or follow up? And truly, the wallet one wins almost every time, right? So I share with you, anytime we publish anything that's business news related, it could be opening, closing of a business, any of those things, those are almost the most highly engaged stories that we see because it's impact to somebody's life. So again, as you're producing things, think about what you're doing, how that impacts, and again, to the local community, right? That's what most media companies are built to do, and talk to the local community. So again, international students are great, and I have nothing against international students, get me wrong, but that may not be the story that actually plays to your local audience. They're not going to be as engaged with that, but they are going to care more about little Susie, who came from the local high school, who's now doing really well on your local campus, and what they're doing and how they're moving on to bigger and better things. Last thing I've really got on my kind of talking points here, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions for the group, is help me with headlines, right? So again, a press release is great, but headlines are extra work for our group, right? So if you've got a great headline, send it. And I'm really looking for two different headlines. The first one is the one that I'm going to probably publish in a print medium headline, right? That's a short, sweet, engaging headline. Again, might be a call to action if you're on radio or video. But the second one, and ultimately is more important in many regards to my organization, and should be more important to your organization, is a really well-written SEO-friendly headline. And again, what I publish in the print edition is not necessarily going to be the same headline I publish in our digital online version. If you give me a really good SEO version, that's going to be really good for getting traffic to my site, and it's really going to be better traffic to get to your site, right? So just preparing for this meeting, I did a Google search real quickly for Ben's group and said, hey, if I did TSTC, and again, I use the Marshall campus because that's one of my markets, and outside of TSTC's own websites, the Marshall News Messenger is the next best thing in Google headlines of things that we've published in regards to things going on at TSTC's campus. And again, that's because in most local markets, the media's website is the best SEO website because they're being updated almost every day. Well, they should be being updated every day. And they have as many more external links than anybody else. So again, that plays right into Google's algorithm. So again, give yourself another chance to win and get eyeballs, right? So that might be not necessarily that they read it on our site, but if they're Googling for your institution, if that SEO is really good, it's another place. Either they might be going directly to your site or they might be going to a media site. But again, they're seeing your name populate that entire search. So with that, I'll take a pause. I kind of rambled on pretty quickly for 20 minutes. What can I answer? What can I make murkier?
Alexander, I remember, so when I worked in newspapers, we would get a lot of universities that would send in the honor rolls or the dean's list every semester. I always hated running those, but they were kind of nice to have if for some reason I was like, I got some copy I need a spot I need to fill, and maybe I can squeeze it in there. Is that anything that's of interest anymore to local papers?
Yeah. So the graduation section is one of the best read sections because local, especially again, I'm really talking about the local one, right? So if it is a local kid in a local town, guess what? Mom and grandmom are still showing up and they want to cut it out and they want to put it on the refrigerator. That is still tried and true. So yes, there is absolutely still a desire for that from consumers. And it is still I think the part that we don't get now that I would is more photos, right? There is, I'm thinking about graduation season. We may have between local community colleges and other institutions of higher learning, as well as the high school schedule. I could have 4 or 5 different graduations that happen on the same day. We don't have the resources to get to every single one of them. And that's the part where if you called and said, hey, journalist ABC, I'm going to make your life easier. I will get you the list. I will get you headshots of each kid that's graduating and a couple, candidates from the actual ceremony. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. That means I can put my resources to the one we know somebody can't cover, right? And then I think at the end of each semester, if you've got that list, I'd send it in. Again, it is to your point, there's some times where you're just like, hey, I got 12 inches. I need to fill it. That's stuff that's, again, an easy win for your institutions to be visible. And again, is local copy. Because again, what happens with that those opening spaces, do I go local or do I grab something out of AP? Our readers would rather read your dean's list and see a kid they know than us pulling something off of AP that they, again, can get anywhere else. Again, that dean's list is more valuable to my reader because it's local. And again, just give you guys more eyeballs. So yeah, I would continue putting those things together and continue sending them in.
What kind of resolution do you like for photos?
Yeah, great question. I would send them in 300 DPI if you can. And the reason I say that is if it for some reason, so we've got glossy magazine products that maybe that story, that image gets used for, that's not necessarily a newsprint quality. If it's at 300, we can always go down, right? If you send it to me as, I kind of gave that example of a church giving us pasting a photo into a Word document, which is obviously a no-no. But if you only send me a 72 DPI version, that's only going to be good for web. We're really restricted of where we can use it and how we can use it. So you give it at 300, I make sure it's the other part of that is make sure it's a decent size, that can be expanded up or down. Again, it gives you, another opportunity to win. The other part of that is follow up to that is not just the quality, but if you got cut lines, right? I'd rather know what the people in that photo's names are, what their titles are. That's again more interesting to the consumer at the end of this relationship, other than, hey, 4 people sitting at a laptop in the Commons, right? That's B-roll to me from a photo standpoint. So again, if you can add that, that's just going to help go, oh, hey, we can copy that, great photo, great cut line. Hey, we can use that. If there's a piece misses, well, maybe we'll run with what we already have on file, and we at least know that name's spelled correctly, and we're not going to be in trouble for using the wrong title.
I have a question for you.
Alexander, speaking of cut lines, and I'm sorry I came a little late to the meeting, but is there a particular format you like press releases in? What is the easiest way to receive that?
Yeah, email. Yeah, email that's not a PDF, because right, if you're sending it to me as a PDF, somebody's got to retype it, and most times that's I'm gonna be honest, that goes to a pile that's probably not going to get used. So if it's a document that's easily copy and pasted into whatever CMS that the journalist is working within, makes their job easier. They can make those edits and to add other copy from something else they're working on. And again, the same thing with those cut lines, right? If you that could be just being the body of the email. What I'd recommend is if you can is, hey, this is Lorenzo here. Here's the information we talked about. I've given you 2 versions, right? I've attached it in a Word document or Google Sheet doc, whatever you're using. I've attached the 2 photos, and below I've also copy and pasted it into the body of this email. Again, either version allows that author to use it in either way. The reason why I say don't just attach it is not that any journalist has ever done this, but they hit forward, and that attachment just disappears somewhere in the forwarding of the forwarding of the forwarding. And if it stays in if you've at least copied and pasted it into the body of the email, if it does get forwarded to an editor, or maybe you send it to me, but hey, I've got another buddy that's working on, can pick it up that week, and I want them to do the story, better chance that you don't have your copy lost along the way. Because again, going to the lowest common denominator, if I lost it, I don't want to have to call you back and say, hey, so I lost your press release, right? I'm probably just not going to make the call. I'm probably just going to go on to the next thing.
Hey, Alex, I have a question. I'm pretty new to writing press releases, and I've only done a few so far this semester, but sometimes at the college we have news that we would like to get the word out about that isn't necessarily a big, huge deal. It's just something kind of everyday, but it might be something that's worth sharing. So is it common to send in things that are outside of the format of a full-on press release and just kind of, here's some information, here's some photos?
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to send it. And again, if you're making that relationship with the reporter or the editor, whoever's kind of your main point of contact, I don't think it's ever a bad thing to say, hey, I've got this bite of information, right? This is something we're working on. Here's an idea. We think this is cool. Send it. Again, they might say, hey, tell me more. That could help. So I don't think it ever always has to. I actually don't believe it should always. I don't think it should always be a formal thing, right? If sometimes it should be formal, sometimes it should be, hey, here's 2 paragraphs on this thing we think's cool, and I think even better, this great photo. I hope you guys can pick it up. Love to talk more about this if you have time. Which also brings me another thing is talking about picking up the phone and just kind of building that relationship. If you haven't invited your local journalist onto campus and just walked around and had a kind of walking tour, I would do that immediately. Because what journalists are most talented in doing is seeing things that you don't see. And they're going to ask you questions that you probably aren't necessarily in your head about. So like that, your president or vice president or chancellor is after you about this one thing over in the right corner. The journalist is probably going to walk through and say, hey, what's that over on the left? Right. And again, it may not be the most big, the highest priority to everybody else, but it may be a really interesting story that gets eyeballs onto the thing that you're most concerned about. So I think they're often really good to get on campus, get them comfortable with campus. So if you send over that story of the little thing that you're working on, and you say, hey, can you go, that professor's over in XYZ building, they're comfortable to go meet that professor and aren't worrying about where they got to park or how do they get to that building, or again, make their life easy, right? Make it as simple as possible. But I think you'll find if you get them on campus and invite them into into your world, you'll find that you get a better response, especially when it's something you're like, hey, I really need help to get this published. Can one of the things that I have found is with some of our institutions that we cover is there's always this feeling of, hey, you're at arm's length. We don't really want you. That they never say it, right? But it is emoted that you may not be completely welcome there. And I get it, right? You guys your job is to control the narrative. That is what you've been hired to do, right? You are supposed to tell all the good things and control the marketing and so a journalist doesn't always want to follow that exact rule. But again, if I bring you in and have a relationship and we're having a dialogue and I feel welcome, I'm more apt to say, hey, can you clarify this for me? Than just say, hey, this is the soundbite, I'm running with it.
Alex, you talked about press releases, and I think that's kind of the default for a lot of folks is sending the press releases. I'm curious about other options like featured stories. How often you're going to run something that, say, a college writes as a feature about whatever, and whether it's your byline or their byline. And then also too, if we're doing something like we've got our own research institute, and so they're always kind of coming up with new data. So do you like to have those charts and graphs and so forth attached with the stories?
Yeah, I think so. To the latter part of that question, I think any extra visual you can provide is a plus, right? Anything that that you have that we may not have easy access to or is outside of our purview, it is a plus. Again, but I'll put this asterisk, right? Is it digestible and understandable by the person who's going to read it, right? There's a lot of jargon in every industry that makes no sense to anyone outside of that industry. And is it going to be something I can follow? And the example I'd give is, whenever we cover millage rates on tax increases, right? I don't think the average person really knows what a millage rate actually equates to, right? So if we write a headline that says, or gives a chart that says, hey, millage rates are going up by 2%, I think people's eyes glaze over and they go, oh man, I'm going to get robbed again. Tax time comes around. And that's where they're done. But if we do a better job of saying, hey, millage rates are increasing by 2%, but what that actually equates to is for every $100,000 value of your house, your taxes went up $2, right? That's now more understandable. So that's why, so to your question of charts and those things, is it the $2 equation that I can follow, or is it the millage rate that is just going to go right over my head and I'm like, whatever that institute's doing over there, I don't care. But if you can say, hey, this is something I can digest, then yes, I think it's really valuable information. To the press, yeah, I think the default is, that press release piece. And that's why I keep talking about, hey, if you can brainstorm with your, local journalists and say, hey, are you working on, right now we're working on a profiles piece that, hey, every week we put out a new section. One's on people, right? One's on education. One is on economic movement, and the fourth one's escaping me. But right, that'd be a great one if you, as an institution, you want to be in that education section, right? Well, if you're talking to them, you can say, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but we've got a new professor from Trinidad and Tobago, and they're visiting, and they're doing great work in the community. Hey, that's something we would want to put in the education section, or they might be a great feature in our people section. So that's where I think those things are. That's less press release. That's now a dialogue. Or you may just pick up the phone and kind of his earlier question of, hey, we're working on these little things. That little thing might actually be a big thing for us, right? That could actually turn into something of, hey, I've got this little nugget that you go, man, I read that, and that person sounds really interesting. We'd love to feature them. Those features are also, if you're working with a news organization that is producing, magazines, they care about the features, right? That is lighter, that is more feature driven, and what I'd call lighter reading. But that's where, hey, let's highlight the local guy who grew up here, is now working in the development part of the institution, and let's tell his story and what he's doing in the community. And this is a guy that started from here and went all the way up. Let's communicate that and show off, and let's get in here with a good photographer. Let's take some really good photos. But again, that starts from that feature. Hey, I have an idea of this guy. What do you think?
Does anybody else have any more questions? Well, Alexander, I want to thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I thought what you did for us in the summer was great. I thought everybody else would like to hear it too.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, and Ben share my email contact information. I'm happy to, if anybody's got a follow-up question, I'm happy to have a conversation at any time.
Annie, you got a question?
Yeah, I forgot to ask. So I'm the Marshall campus communication specialist, and I'm in regular contact with Nick. Do you want me to is there ever a time where you want me to send things to both him and you?
Nick would be your better contact. But if there's stuff that you really want me to be aware of, you can always copy me. But absolutely, Nick is going to help you a lot faster than I'm ever going to.
Yeah, he's a great contact. We work together all the time.
And that's something, Lorenzo's at WTC, and when I worked at Snyder, we had a good relationship with stuff. So I knew what was going on when I worked at the Snyder paper. Because of
I would say, well, as she kind of mentioned with Nick, part of that was both she and Nick were pretty new to to each position at the time. So I think the idea of just connecting was part of it, right? Just, hey, learning from each other, and I'm new, you're new, and journalists turn over. That I don't know how fast in your industry people turn over in their jobs, but that's the other part of know who the new kid on the block is. And again, the faster you're willing to welcome them in, faster they're probably going to pay attention, because they're trying to figure out which direction is up.
Yep. Well, Alexander, I appreciate it. I think, Jonathan, we still got registrations open for the conference.
Yeah, registration will be open through April. So if you haven't registered, be sure to register. So we got some great breakout sessions that are coming similar to this one. So really excited to have Alexander today, and as well as all the sessions we'll have for the conference.
All right. If nobody has any more questions, Alexander, I do appreciate your time today.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alexander. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.